Well, let's get some more live reaction now to the passing of Andrew Mlangeni at the age of 95. Mcebisi Ndletyana is a professor of politics at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Ndletyana, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time today. What kind of example did Andrew Mlangeni set for South Africans?
Well, Andrew was an iconic figure, Stephen. Someone who inspired people to his own. He didn't say things that he believed in, but acted them out. So, especially for the ANC, in the last 10 years, he was one person that they could turn to as a moral figure that would independently arbitrate over conflicts, for instance. So for me, he remained an embodiment of the moral aspect that the ANC was all about.
It's quite interesting, his role as chair of the Integrity Committee of the ANC. In fact, if I remember correctly, he told me that he had been announced as chair of the Integrity Committee before he had been formally told himself. Was he able to play the role that he wanted? Did the Integrity Committee do what he wanted it to do in terms of the role it was supposed to play in the ANC?
Well, I don't think he was the first guy to be told about his own appointment before he even knew about it. The ANC does a lot, is in the habit of doing a lot of that. But in his case, I think they were also confident that he would not decline an appointment like that. I mean, that's one of the brilliant things about Mlangeni, in that he was willing to serve really in whatever capacity in the ANC. And even though these were not, prominent, luminary positions, but he realized how important these positions were, even though they were behind the scenes. And especially the Integrity Commission, Stephen, as you would know, came at the right time when the ANC was faced with a moral crisis. You needed someone who would poke the party's conscience, and I don't think anyone did that better than Mlangeni, because he had no airs about him. He didn't hate anybody. He was not envious of anyone. He was clear about his own contribution and did his role excellently without wanting to outshine anybody. So he was the perfect candidate to lead the Integrity Commission, even though I think he would have preferred that the committee took a lot more active role and its decisions were binding. I think if the ANC, Stephen, really wants to honor Mlangeni, is to ensure that that Integrity Commission, its decisions are binding, to really reaffirm the moral orientation of the organization.
These moments, maybe it's just me, Professor, but I sometimes wonder if these moments when a struggle icon, especially someone of the stature of Andrew Mlangeni, passes, if these moments give the ANC a moment of sort of discomfort or uncomfortableness, because they put a focus on what the ANC was and what some people perceive the ANC to be now.
Well, that reflection is important. That reflection is important for the ANC. It's an old organization, more than 100 years old, and it does attract all sorts of characters who are not quite committed to its own mission. And so at times it does veer off, even, steered into bad direction by people who should know better. And so people like Andrew Mlangeni, their death are useful, reflective moments. They become memories that we recollect now and then to remind ourselves or to ask of ourselves whether we are still on the right path. And so I hope that the ANC and the country as a whole will continue to recall those memories. Because it's part of who we are, is the legacy that has been bequeathed us by people like Mlangeni. So their memories are useful moments to ask whether we are still committed to the values that we set ourselves earlier.
I was struck in some ways by the differences and similarities between the South Africa that Andrew Mlangeni grew up in and the South Africa of today. So, for example, at the age of 12, he had to leave school and actually go and find work for his family. He ended up working on a golf course. We spoke to Newzroom Afrika a moment ago who was talking about his love of golf. There are people now who, while legally no one's allowed to work until the age of 18, there will be households now where children as young as 12 are trying to do anything they can to get enough food. It shows you how the country's changed and how it hasn't changed.
Well, it does. It does. And I mean, part of the reason, remember that generation is the first generation to engage in politics on a fairly full-time basis. Because the earlier generation were mostly professional and tended to focus more on their professional careers. But Mlangeni's generation veered more into politics, partly because South Africa itself had changed. It was industrializing. So you had a larger urban population of workers who are becoming increasingly restless with an increasingly oppressive apartheid state. So that explains the distinction of the Mlangeni generation to the earlier generation of Seme and Kumba. And so with every generation, because of the changing context, and the 1940s apartheid oppression in the 50s was quite severe. And that's what got them into more full-time activism, because they realized that it is not something that you could eliminate through part-time activity, right? So the point then being that with every moment, because of its particular conditions and perhaps severity, it produces a particular kind of leaders, and steers them into a certain kind of direction. And certainly the struggle now, because of the kind of issues that you have today, are quite different from what Mlangeni and them faced at the time. Now you are faced with moral issues, moral problems that are created by people who are held up as heroes of the anti-apartheid struggle. So that too requires a different kind of leadership. It's not enough that you were part of the anti-apartheid struggle, that you went to prison or this or that. The important thing that is whether or not you live your life ethically, that you use your position responsibly in service of the public. So those are the questions we should be asking increasingly more these days, rather than simply to defer to people by virtue of the fact that they went to prison, because yesterday's heroes are today's villains. So we should ask them again, are you still worthy of the leadership positions that you occupy?
Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, thanks very much indeed from the University of Johannesburg there.